like stuffy.
Madam Chair, we're ready whenever you are.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the Cuyahoga County Council Committee of the Whole for today, Tuesday, May the 27th, 2014. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Calling the roll, Ms. Conwell. Ms. Conwell is absent at the moment. Mr. Jones.
Here.
Mr. Hairston.
On the way.
Mr. Hairston is absent at the moment. Ms. Simon. Mr. Greenspan. Mr. Miller. Mr. Brady. Mr. Brady is absent today. Mr. Germana. Mr. Germana is absent at the
In
moment.
traffic.
Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Schron.
Here.
And Ms. Conley.
Here.
There is a quorum.
Is there any public comment related to the agenda?
Madam Chair, there is none.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item 4. These are items referred to the committee. We look forward to a presentation from the Metro Parks about Whiskey Island. And I'm not sure who's going to go first. We have a number of people here, so we'd like to call forward whoever is going to speak first. Or Majid, do you want to speak first?
Madam Chair, if I may read it into the record?
Sorry, go ahead.
That's quite all right. Resolution number 2014-0125, a resolution authorizing the transfer of certain county properties to the Board of Park Commissioners of the Cleveland Metropolitan Park District, authorizing the lease of certain county properties to said board, authorizing the county executive to take all necessary actions and to execute all documents necessary to consummate the contemplated transactions, authorizing the Director of Public Works to administer the project, and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Thank you very much, Madam President and members of council. Just very quickly, this is an item we've been dealing with literally from 2011 when I joined the county. It was one of the very first things, even in my early discussions with the prosecutor's office, that we have this project that had begun in 2005 and we need to bring it to conclusion. As you're all aware, the Board of County Commissioners had acquired Whiskey Island and Wendy Park back in 2005, and I think the intent all along was that this property would eventually be transferred to the Metro Parks as part of a broader...
And Majid, it was privately owned before then?
It was.
Okay.
I think it was owned by Whiskey Island partner, the Dan Moore entities. I don't
That's
know
okay, it was a private
exact-
ownership, okay.
Yes, it was in private ownership, and I think there was even more to it. Part of it was part of the discussion was moving the port over there, and I think the commissioner stepped in and got it quickly to avoid that happening, to preserve it as public space. And so we've been working on that for quite a bit, and in the interim, we've had the discussions with the Metro Parks, and the Metro Parks also had 3 smaller properties that they needed for different events happening in the county. 2 of them are on the east bank of the flats and the west bank of the flats. And then the other one is what's called Heritage Park, one for the towpath and others for the water taxi. And Brian Zimmerman will be able to explain all that to you when he gets up here. We've all along approached this transaction thinking of it in the sense of who's our partner in this transaction, being the Metro Parks. If you think of it for a second, we have 2 political subdivisions, Cuyahoga County and the Cleveland Metro Parks, both supported by the exact same taxpayers. So this is not a situation where you're shifting responsibility from one taxpayer to the other. It's the exact same taxpayers that support both the Metro Parks and Cuyahoga County. One of those entities is in the business of running parks, and the other entity is not in the business of running parks. So even when you go back in terms of our own real estate consolidation and what properties make sense for the county to keep and what property doesn't make sense for the county to keep, those obviously predated us, but were very early on our analysis that these should be conveyed to their ultimate use. The deal is as follows. We are transferring the Whiskey Island and Wendy Park to the Metro Parks and the Heritage Park property. And then the Flats East Bank properties, because there's a bridge over there that we need maintenance over them, those are a lease to the Metro Parks for purposes of their water taxi. So that's basically the transaction that is before you. Brian Zimmerman from the Metro Parks will go over what the Metro Parks will do with the properties. But here are a couple of dates to be aware of. Is with Whiskey Island, the way that the county purchased it was they paid a purchase price, but they broke it over 10 years. So there was the initial payment, and there was a promissory note that we've been making payments on it. And the very last payment is due December 16 of 2014. The amounts for that have been reserved. They've been reserved all along for that promissory note. So the idea, but they were all tied together as one transaction, basically, and the due diligence, everything is finished on all of them. So there is no contingencies under which somebody would get out of the deal. But what would happen is we would close on if council approves the transactions, we would close on the transactions with respect to the properties. With Whiskey Island, the only item remaining is once the last payment is made and the county has full title, automatically at that point, the county has the right, we convey the title to the Metro Parks for those properties. And I think now I'll turn it over. If you have any other questions for me, and then I'll turn it over to Brian Zimmerman to give you an explanation of what they're doing with the properties, and then we can go from there.
Madam President, the question, Law Director, you said once the final payment is made, and I might have missed this, how many payments are left?
One
One.
payment. So it's, I think what's remaining is somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.32 million on the promissory note. It was, I think, 1.9 million over a number of
And
years.
when is that payment due?
December 16.
Is
Of this-
it the expectation to accelerate that?
No, it's the expectation is everything remains the same as it was entered back in 2005. And then once we have complete title without any contingencies at that point, it transfers to the Metro Park. So we're not accelerating. The deal is exactly the deal that the commissioners had entered into.
And is it a clean title as far as we know today?
It should be. I think they've been doing title searches on it and everything, title examinations. It should be very.
No EPA issues, no Ohio EPA, US EPA on the
They
property?
did the phase one, I think, on it and came out okay. So, and that's part of the thing that I wanted to make sure on it is we wanted to complete the due diligence now before we submit it to council, because we didn't want to do the type of transaction where we submit it to you, but there's this out or that out, and we spent months doing due diligence. We wanted to make sure that all of that is finished before the deal is here.
All right, thank you.
Does the map help? I know you all have the map in front of you. I can speak to that. Does everybody have a chance to see here? I hope that helps. Well, members of council, thank you very much for having us here today. to speak
Excuse me, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to speak into the microphone. The system doesn't really allow for.
It doesn't allow for me to move around.
No, I'm sorry.
All right.
No wandering. I'd like to also say that Councilwoman Conwell and Councilman Hairston have joined the meeting.
Well, thank you very much. I'll introduce myself. Brian Zimmerman, Cleveland Metro Parks. I have been with Cleveland Metro Parks since 2004, having come from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Having looked at these particular pieces of property here for a number of years, it actually goes back even farther than that with Cleveland Metro Parks and this opportunity to preserve this wonderful piece of land, this piece of property, really the gateway to the community. We have also worked very strategically over the last few years putting together our plan that really helps tie together a number of other pieces of green space. Last year on June 6th, we worked with the City of Cleveland, who was the fee owner of the Lakefront State Parks, as well as the state ODNR, working on the transfer of Edgewater Park, Gordon Park, Villa Angela, Euclid, Wildwood, and Gordon. And so those properties have now aligned us with further lakefront connections, i.e. Huntington Reservation, which we've had for quite a number of years. Whiskey Island in particular, and some of the major components of this transaction really allow for more of a connected community. Leadership Cleveland, the Fellows Group, has been working very diligently on the proposal of connecting the east and west bank of the flats. As Majid had mentioned, under the lease opportunity, we anticipate being able to run more of a east-west as the first leg of the connector, as well as then more into the north-south down to Merwin's Wharf. In 2011, Cleveland Metro Parks acquired a 2.8 acre parcel of land, affectionately called Rivergate Park. Part of the Rowing Foundations group is there, as well as a collaborative with the City of Cleveland Skate Park, and our work where our kayaks will come in and out of. We're also working with folks from the Canal Corridor Association, the City of Cleveland, and Cuyahoga County. Stan is in the room as well, working on the section of towpath that has now been completed, leading into Canal Basin Park, which is the terminus of the towpath. There's two very distinct things that I want to make sure that people keep in mind when considering this. The towpath is a separate trail system that terminuses into the Canal Basin Park, which is where Heritage Park 1 is. There has been the Women's Garden Club of Cleveland have been the stewards of the cabin for quite a number of years. We have met with them a number of times, and they seem very excited about the proposed transfer into Cleveland Metro Parks, as well as this yellow or orange line here that actually is the proposed Lake Link Trail, which helps actually connect all of the parcels of land, as well as the pink line that comes from the end of Wendy Park Whiskey Island all the way down into Edgewater Park, making that further proposed connection. These properties do really represent about 65 plus or minus acres that will be coming over to Metro Parks in this proposed transactions. I could go on for a long period of time because I'm very excited about these, but if there are questions, I can certainly entertain as we go on.
So just generally, if the county transfers this property to the Metro Park, what's going to be the difference, either the taxpayer or the user of Whiskey Island? What's going to be the difference to me?
I think that's a great question. You know, as County Executive Fitzgerald and Majid framed up, this is what we do. We're in the park business, so I think it's putting things under one umbrella on the lakefront. We anticipate further enhancements. We have agreed to a sum just a little bit greater than $6 million over time worth of investments into the park. Our Board of Park Commissioners, this next board meeting, will consider matching funds with the Cleveland Foundation for the opportunity to look at the Coast Guard station here, which has been shuttered since 1976. It also, where the connections really start to really work for the community, is making these linear connections. We're working with the Cuyahoga County Port Authority, where the red line goes from Wendy Park, Whiskey Island, to expand the fence back on the Ed Hauser Way, making that more of a linear connection to the to Edgewater Park, as well as enhancements from the Lake Link Trail, i.e. the bridge that would need to come across, and then effectively connect with the Lake Link Trail, as well as further enhanced improvements. As the county may know, that the marina was just mostly rebuilt with the work of FEMA and the folks here. We are paying under this proposal part of the local match that helps actually bring the marina up to the newest and most feasible docks at this point in time, as well as being very complementary to some of the things that go on there, i.e. the volleyball courts. It is one of the most important birding areas in all of Northeast Ohio as a migratory pathway.
Having been previously married to a boater, what happens to all those docks? Are those people grandfathered in? Or? So
that's a great question as it refers to the overall marina operations. There are some what we call docominium arrangements that are more of a long-term. As Majid had mentioned, more of the due diligence on title, making sure that we've got all of the transactions in play, as well as there are just people that dock there on a yearly contract. So we have all of those things considered. We anticipate that it will continue. It's an absolutely gorgeous, brand new rebuilt marina.
I mean, is there a fair and equitable way of getting a slip there? I mean, I know people kill for dock space.
You know, it's interesting. I think that's, again, another great question. As you start to see the Edgewater Marina that has been rebuilt, East 55th, there are public opportunities above and beyond the 5 or so different yacht clubs that are up and down the shoreline of Lake Erie here. So I think there is a very good way for the general public to have access. And our further points are that this park is for the public. It's for the public's consumption.
So you will have a fair and equitable way of people getting an opportunity to get a dock there?
That is correct.
Is there any other questions? Because, I don't know, procedurally, I know you're asking, you submitted legislation at our last meeting, and it was referred to committee, and so this is the committee of the whole to consider it. But and I understand that the request will be that we approve this tonight under suspension of the rules, and I have some concerns about that. we do have a rule that requires us three readings, and I had actually asked Jean and I talked about this a little bit before, and Jean, do you want to just go over the rules so that people are aware of the rules that we have adopted in connection with the 3 readings?
Right, well, basically, there is Rule 90 that requires 3 readings, as well as the county charter that requires 3 readings. However, if this item, if you send this out of committee this evening, and you want it on tonight's agenda because it's of an emergency nature, then there is Rule 6B of the council rules that says that council may, by adoption of a parliamentary motion, change the order of business or add items or delete items from the order of business from council's meeting agenda. So you have the ability to put this on the agenda this evening if you so wish.
So we'd have to adopt 2, we'd have to pass 2 motions. One, to put it on the agenda.
Well, first you would just send this, at this meeting
Yeah.
right now, you
So
would send
3.
this out, send it to the full council consideration under second reading adoption under suspension of rules.
Okay, then we would have to vote to actually basically amend the agenda to add the walk-on.
That's correct, yes.
And then we would still then have to vote again to suspend the rule to 9D.
That is
with
correct,
3 readings.
yes,
So,
yes. You
does
have it.
anyone have a comment as to, should we consider it, well, let me stop. Why don't you tell us the reason that we have to, that you think it's important that we do it tonight?
Thank
Before we
you.
get to the questions.
Great question. As many
Every
would
question I
know,
have, you say they're great questions.
we were prepared for them, so they're all great questions. Thank you again. The consideration that we're looking for, as our body, our Board of Park Commissioners has approved this transaction at this point in time. As many know, the work with the Flats Leadership Cleveland Group has come to an end, and we are working forward. Anytime you're dealing with water and transactions and making connections with the Army Corps of Engineers, there's a certain amount of time frame that you need in lead time, and there's things that we would like to get work underway immediately because of that. In particular, to help enhance this connection, this cross connection here, help to understand the water taxi connection that's proposed north and south. Docking in the Army Corps of Engineers isn't necessarily a simple process, so time is of the essence as we start that process with those folks, as well as we have been doing certain maintenance along the way. We've been taking care of graffiti and others, and so we would really like to be able to move this transaction effectively forward this evening with your consideration.
Right, this question? Yeah, go ahead, Bishop.
So those items that you just listed off, they're being held up because of the Whiskey Island issue, or can you move on those as separate transactional activities?
As the transactions laid out in both Majid and our counselor here as well, as I understand, the lease would become effective immediately tonight for those, if the council so approved, and then we would be able to begin essentially immediately. The Wendy Park can be a little bit later, which, as we've agreed in the transaction to close December 17th. So it does definitely give us an opportunity to get moving.
So the Windy Park is really not effective till December anyway.
That is correct, under the transfer.
If I may, yeah, that's true. The conveyance is not happening until December, but the way that they were structured is a single transaction in a single purchase and sale agreement. So it's not segregable in the way that the agreement is a singular agreement. And it was done specifically to make sure that all of it happens at once, that we don't, sort of do some of them and then the other remains. The Metro Parks wanted the 3 pieces. We wanted to do the Whiskey Island, so they were done as a compromise where we did them all together. We got what we wanted, and they got what they wanted in it, and as a singular transaction.
And then one of the detailed drawings I've seen of the Skyway project, it has a landing spot within Whiskey Island. Is anything we're doing today going to affect our ability as a county to make sure, if that should be decided to be something that was going forward, would it affect the ability to go into this? And I guess I'll come down real bluntly. Is it going to be an area where the green movement is going to say, no, we can't land a vehicle into here as far as on the skywalk or anything like that, as far as the Skyway project?
I think there's conversations that have been had that have really allowed for the ability, what you're speaking to is essentially this area, this node right here, to complement other areas that may be in the Great Lakes Science Center Rock Hall as maybe a phase one. I've even seen one iteration of more of the Flats East Banked area. I have not most recently seen any further design concepts and or funding models, but certainly we would entertain all of those as we were being able to move forward. It's not necessarily a huge landing platform, but certainly a small building would need to be put in that would have to go under consideration for that particular area. Certainly making east-west connections is one of our top priorities. This is the very simplest form to make this connection, as well as the Lake Link Trail. So there are multimodal ways to hopefully get to Wendy Park Whiskey Island.
And I'm not saying whether it'd be good or bad, but it looks from designs, it could be an iconic effect, like the bridge in San Francisco and the arch in St. Louis and things of that nature. By transferring this property today, are we losing the ability to control that agenda as far as the county? And we might come back later on and say, gee, I wish we would have at least carved that out of the deed transfer right now to make sure that that constraint is put in place. And I see the folks from Thompson Hine out there in the audience, so perhaps is it a way in which we could make sure that the public is protected on that component should it ever go forward?
I'll defer to Alan if he raised his hand.
I didn't raise my hand.
No, I watched the eye. No, he didn't raise his hand. It was the anxiety factor when I was asking it looked like.
No, I think the one reminder that I would, so let me say twofold. Number one is obviously we're transferring ownership to the Metro Park, so the Metro Park is going to be the owner of that property. So you will need their consent if you're going to do anything of that nature. But the one reminder that I would keep going back to is keep in mind what kind of entity we're doing the deal with. This is a deal between two public entities that have shared goals, that share the very same taxpayers. So I would presume that the Metro Parks would be, receptive to any kind of transaction. They would want to increase access to that facility as much as anybody else because they would want more people to get into it. Again, once you get into the design and how much, I don't know necessarily, even if we owned it, whether the county would want to do something that would end up getting rid of the park anyhow. So I really don't know enough about it to harm it in any way, but I would just, in the sense of, we're doing the deal with the Metro Parks. This is not a private party that's going to run away with the property and, have their own plans for some kind of different transaction.
Now, I understand that, but sometimes you get to the point where you don't want to have as much activity going on in a park. There's some groups that want to have park access constrained as far as the vehicle and the type of techniques and type of methods. All you have to do is go out and look at the Grand Canyon and see how that's changed dramatically as far as public access and the way it's changed, and whether or not we can be incorporating it, because it's also an economic development engine if those skywalks, skyways become part of the downtown community. So that's why I think today is the day to be asking that question before we transfer that property.
I think, again, effectively, our goal is to make further connections to these parks. We're trying to find as many ways to get people actually into the park, because right now, as most folks know, there's only one way in from land. So we are trying to work on the bridge connection. I have talked with John Stahl and Will Friedman, both with the port, about this possibility, as well as where the bridge essentially would land here as well. So it could essentially be created as a hub. So we'll entertain all of those opportunities to get into the park, because ultimately that's our goal.
Thank you, Madam President. Hi, Mr. Zimmerman, good to see you. I have a concern about the access you're speaking to in terms of trying to get as many people on this island as possible. You said it's a sensitive birding area, and what measures are going to be taken to make sure that the nesting sites and the birds' ability to have privacy for nesting would be protected?
Well, I think there's always a balance. Certainly when we look at metro parks in general, we've applied the 80-20 rule, 80% passive recreation, 20% active recreation. And this park actually meets those components as it's currently designed. We don't anticipate changing that directly. Certainly, just because it's green doesn't mean it's necessarily food for migrant birds. Certainly, I think being able to enhance some of those things, actually bringing different types of either tree species or shrub species into the park, I think, can be extremely important. This part, the park that sits up in the upper boundary part, is really one of the most majestic areas of all. You can see downtown as well as beautiful lake views, and that is essentially kind of the wooded area of that park. We've actually been working with the county for a number of years to do controlled burns on the property as well. So we have had some stewardship working in concert with making sure that we're protecting the birds. But again, I think creating access, making sure people have an ability to come and go into the park freely, getting into the park, proper area, instead of having to go all the way down and around. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I've never had trouble getting to Whiskey Island going down and around. I mean, I don't think it's that hard. So what are you proposing in terms of this water taxi specifically? So
the concept that has been vetted through working with our staff and as well as the Leadership Cleveland folks, the very first phase is the east-west connection here, actually putting that back into play to link both sides of the flats through the 1170 building, as well as working down into Merwin's Wharf, the Rivergate portion that's here. The group was actually very excited about the possibility of connecting further over the assets of the Rock and Roll, the Science Center, when the actual bridge gets connected at that point in time, to make this really a looped concept so people could safely transition throughout this entire downtown area and the flats area. So again, our first opportunity is to connect the east and west, and then further go north and south down the river.
One more question, Madam President. A concern I have, I just want to state the concern, this is going to become an extension of the flats, and it's going to become a party haven for people to come and drink, and that I see that a potential problem, but I'm just...
What I can speak to is the current uses of the park. They have the Sunset Grill that is currently there. They have a very widely held and regarded volleyball league, as well as the boating culture there. So we don't anticipate other changes other than that, just more of being able to get multi-modes of transportation, whether it be bike or pedestrian, into the park safely.
Okay, and lastly, the county passed a pesticide management ordinance, as you know, that and I want to, do you know about our ordinance that covers county property? You and I have talked about that. Are you going to continue with that model of use of pesticides on Whiskey Island?
I cannot speak to what I assume the county is, has not been applying any, pesticides to the property since the ordinance was passed. And certainly we are very environmentally friendly as we work through all of our properties, and we would consider that at this property as well.
Well, I want to get some detail on that. It's an integrated pesticide
IPM.
management, and is there any reason why you wouldn't have that philosophy on Whiskey Island?
We would have an integrated pest management
Yes.
approach, which is basically it's a cost-benefit return at that point in time of whether you actually do treat, depending on whether you have like an emerald ash borer infestation, whether you were trying to preserve the trees or you were actually looking at taking them out through other means, whether you actually took them down. So at some point in time, there are opportunities where you would want to save a species through other means.
It's a last resort.
It is.
And you adhere to that and will?
Yes, through an IPM program, absolutely.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Madam President.
Couple questions to the law director. How much is the total purchase price for Whiskey Island?
My understanding is we purchased it for $6.25 million that was spread over the 10 years. So there was the initial payment and then the payments on the promissory note, with the last payment I think being 1.325 or something like that, in 1.352 on December 16th. So the total is 6.25, which is the number that we used for the Metro Parks in terms of their commitment, how much investment they're going to make, the minimum investment they will make in the property.
And Director, am I correct that the county does not receive any direct consideration for the properties transferred and leased, but what consideration is in terms of the investment commitment? Is that correct?
The term consideration is a legal term, so I'm hesitating for a second. I'm pretty sure there's, if you look in the agreements, you'll see like $1 or something to that effect. But that is correct, is that the expectation is the investment in the property. This is, again, a conveyance, but the same taxpayers that are funding it here or there, it's the exact same taxpayers, so it's being transferred from the county to the Metro Park. But that, there's no dollar monetary big payment coming in once these deals transfer now.
And Director, are there commitments for improvements other than at Whiskey Island, Wendy Park, or is that the only case where that's in play?
That's the only, keep in mind, the only other property is Heritage Park, which is for the towpath where we've been involved in it. I think the state is, that's a long-term project. That's Heritage Park. The Flats East properties, we still own them, but we're leasing them to the Metro Parks for purposes of the taxi. So obviously when they do the taxi, they would be doing, they'd be maintaining them for purposes of the water taxi. Now the other part is the what do you call it? The edge, the bulkhead maintenance is the way that it works. Is the Whiskey Island obviously is going to go to Metro Parks, so the Metro Parks would be responsible for any bulkhead maintenance there. On the Flats East and Flats West properties, that's the lease, so that remains our property. On Heritage Park, there is a commitment to, for the first 10 years, any maintenance on the bulkheads, we will reimburse up to 50% of that cost. But keep in mind, otherwise this would have been our property and we would have been, basically incurring 100% of that cost. So this splits it between the two entities.
And Director, on the map that we have, is the water taxi going to be located where it says Flats East Bank and Flats West Bank, or is it going to be located where it says water taxi proposed?
My understanding is, I'll defer to Brian on that, but
The little Metro Park symbols are actually where it would be located, right underneath the bridge. So they actually represent the building that would be renovated at Metro Park's cost, and on the other side, the docking system that would be allowed for to be the receiver side on the west side. So it's essentially the two icons that are on the map.
And is that where the county owns property that we're leasing?
we would be leasing it to the Metro Parks because I think it's the main avenue bridge over it, so we need to maintain ownership of it for the maintenance of the bridge.
Okay.
Madam President, just one comment. I just want to thank Brian Zimmerman for the work at Acacia Metro Park. In Lyndhurst, in my district, it's amazing the transformation we're seeing back to its natural state. So I really appreciate that and trust the stewardship of Whiskey Island.
Thank you.
How much is the water taxi?
So I'm not going to say that's a good question. That's a multifaceted question. So there are many different components that are actually being pulled together yet. We don't have all of the costs.
So it's going to be like a private company's going to run the water taxi? You guys gonna run
No,
it?
we believe that that again, public access and being able to have people be able to flow up and down. Again, the Cuyahoga being one of the most historic rivers in the United States.
Not much business in January, though, right?
I'm sorry.
Not much business in January.
There is a hovercraft option that may have naming rights, but there are definitely challenges during our winter seasons here, but certainly having a wonderful Memorial Day and looking forward towards at least 6 sunny months here a year. This has a really opportunity to connect both sides, move people safely and efficiently back and forth, as well as up and down the
So
river.
are you guys going to run it, or is it going to be private?
Yes,
doing it?
our option is to run it. Correct.
And
Cleveland
there'll be
Metro
some
Parks.
kind of a fee for it?
Correct. Very, very minimal. We're actually looking at partnering with the RTA organization actually to see if we can do some ridership and some sharing concepts, which is still being flushed out.
Okay. So any other questions, Mr. Greenspan?
Thank you. Just,
I didn't look that way.
I'm just focusing this question on the expediency issue over now versus 2 weeks.
Yeah, I got your question.
I understand plans need to take place and so forth, and the earlier it's done, that this passes. But if this was to wait 2 more weeks, what would that delay? How would that delay anything?
Well, when we look at where we've already been maintaining, certain components of it, certainly we would like to, and I'm sure Majid from the legal perspective would like to have it transferred over. We've had folks in and out of all of the buildings to get it over onto the Metro Park side, number one. Number two, we've already been to Buffalo with the groups from the Army Corps, so the sooner we can start the process and get in our next phases, certainly, as we try to bring projects under timeframes, deadlines always seem to get extended, so 2 weeks can make the absolute positive difference between getting this up and running by May of next year. So I do appreciate very much the consideration.
Okay. The couple of questions. The commitment, the $6.5 million commitment of improvements, there was no definitive timeline placed, just we're going to get to it, it's in our plans. You at least have some type of expectation as to when those improvements may be.
So when we look at, I think that was really done for a very specific reason because of getting into the property. As we stated in the transaction, it would not close until the end of this year. We know the marina has been rebuilt this year, so that's actually in very good shape. There was a new pavilion that was put into place. There are a number of water lines and other things that are going to need to be looked at. We also look at the pedestrian bridge connector that would allow for the further connection, as well as some either road enhancements around the park. Again, making sure that we keep the balance of the 80-20, as well as the water taxi area effectively, really making sure that we're preserving that property long-term. We basically have a levy, as you are aware of, that goes out essentially 10 years. We have not borrowed money in our 97-year history. We intend to further those commitments. So that's why I think over time we have the ability to add these enhancements, much as we have made enhancements with the Shoreway project along Edgewater Park as well.
Okay. Mr. McClure made reference to a 50% cost sharing opportunity with the county on some bulkheads. What's the total estimated cost or projected cost of that bulkhead project?
If it would need to be maintained during the course of this next 10-year cycle, because it's on record, I'm not going to give you the exact number because I don't know this per square foot depending on what you're doing. Right now, the bulkhead seems to be in fair condition, but if something were to happen, i.e. a freighter or a ship were to hit it, certainly there would be a number of different entities that would be involved in it. So, bulkheading is not necessarily the least expensive thing, but it's certainly very particular to the overall concept of being able to preserve Canal Basin Park, the cabin that sits on the property as well, and the shoreline revetment. So I do not have the exact figure per square foot because it does go over the 10-year period of time.
Well, other than the bulkhead, what other financial commitments might the county be exposed to over the next 10 years to which we'd have to reimburse or be partially pay for?
To my knowledge, that was the only consideration.
I would just think it's something we should know at some point because we would need to somewhere at least document a contingent liability as to what our obligation may be.
Yeah, under that terms, it is the only cost share on this transaction.
And if I may just sort of clarify that issue, what we're talking about is not Whiskey Island and Wendy Park. What we're talking about is this Heritage Park piece that is for the towpath that even had it stayed in the county ownership, because we're part of the towpath, the Metro Parks has much better liability protection for activities of that nature, so it makes sense to transfer it to the Metro Parks. Had it stayed in the county, we would have been responsible for 100% of the cost. This gets it 50-50 between the two entities for the 10 years.
So is that transaction, then I'm assuming is in our capital improvement budget, then we must, if we were to be responsible for it, then we must have included in our CIP, right?
I would have OBM address that question. I don't know how it is in the current budget, but obviously we own the property, so I don't know where it is in the budget.
I think it's something we should know, because if that's going to be a cost-saving measure by relinquishing 50% of the cost, we should know that. And then the last question I have is these proposed connections that are on this list. When do you expect those to be completed?
So are there ones in particular or in specific?
There are a number of them. There's the Edgewater Wendy Park connector trail. There's the Lake Link trail. the towpath trail proposed, just the ones that are marked proposed, when do we expect the activity to take place?
So I will start with the towpath. The towpath, which is on the far right of your map where it says completed, that will open here very shortly. The dotted line that comes down and across the Carter Road Bridge essentially has been designed to be on-road. So there are some on-road improvements that need to happen to go into the Canal Basin Park. Phase 1, which is essentially from the towpath completed on the purple to Merwin's Wharf, we are in the process of fundraising for right now. We would like to break ground yet this year for the first section that goes again from the purple right underneath towpath completed to Merwin's Wharf. The next section that we're looking at, because of the work that the Cuyahoga County Port is doing on Irishtown Bend, there is some work that we're going to need to do with partner agencies as we move along. The section where it says Lake Link proposed trail through that portion, we started to do a little bit of work on. There are some water issues and there's been debris and filling issues. We would like to see this process completed within the next 2 years, 2 to 2.5 construction seasons. And then the proposed Edgewater Wendy Park Connector Trail, we just got the right of entry with the Cuyahoga County Port to do the survey work along that corridor here within the last 30 days.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Conwell?
Yes, Madam Chair. Would these water taxis go to other parks, parts of the park, like Euclid Beach and Edgewater? Will it expand all the way down there?
So what I can speak to is our first phase to see how viable the connections are. Really, it's designed to be part ambassador. It's designed to be commuter sensitive with all of the opportunities that are moving with the new construction, residential construction along the Detroit Shoreway area. That would be our first phase. That may be something that does get addressed more long term. The connection to Wendy Park and to Merwin's Wharf are something that would be maybe in the year 2 phase, depending on how fast we could get permits. One of the other great challenges is the bridge, the CSX bridge, that goes to be able to run effectively a commuter route to go back and forth. And then you also have to look at different types of boats. A boat that you may use to go east-west would be very different than a boat that you would go along the shoreline with. And so we're sensitive to not get too far in front of ourselves yet to just to see where the demand is actually at. But it's something we definitely have considered, at least in this particular area here in the most recent.
And the 6.25 million, is that strictly for Whiskey Island, or is that part of the money that'll be used for the Euclid Beach area?
So the 6.2 was actually for Whiskey Island, the Wendy Park area. The other ones are portions. So Rivergate is funded by Cleveland Metro Parks. The 1170 part we've already looked at with the Leadership Cleveland Group. There's been a lot of work in kind that's come into that, and we're looking at working in concert to get to the other side. Again, we have to work with the Army Corps of Engineers. That would be funded by Cleveland Metro Parks, which is separate of the $6.2 million.
My question to Madam Chair is Councilman Brady, did this information come out before he left? Because he is now, it used to fall under me, Miller, and him, but I believe he has the majority of Wendy Park now.
Yeah, he was aware of it. Yeah, we had long discussions with him before. So we actually have a two-part decision. First of all, do we want to approve the transfer? And then secondly, do you want to do it under suspension of the rules without the additional reading? So I think it's a big decision to make, because, you know, we have been talking about, I know Mr. Jemanda brought it up, about, you know, having 3 readings because we have a rule for a reason. But then we have to weigh the other side of it is the necessity. So, I mean, that's the question we have to decide.
Madam President? I'm in favor. I don't see any big problem in not suspending the rules and moving forward just because of the work that needs to be done. And the fact they're already, Metro Parks is assuming responsibility, it sounds like now, before they have title. Is that?
I mean, I'm not, I don't know, I hear Mr. Simon, but I'm not if I'm not clear as to the great necessity for the waiving and having it voted on tonight. I'm not to say I can't be convinced, but I can't clearly explain the necessity. And I think I need to be, and we all need to be able to understand that.
I don't see an urgency. I haven't heard urgency. And so I'm okay if we hold it as well, just.
For the June 10th? Councilman Boyle over there.
Madam,
I should be so
Wait,
misfortunate.
hold on, Mr. Jones, let Mr. Jones speak first.
this is more procedure. If we're dealing with this item in committee, was there a necessity to post 24 hours before you actually go to committee?
No, we had it scheduled for committee of the whole. It was referred to committee of the whole at the last meeting. And so, but this is the first time it's been heard before a committee. So we would have to waive we'd have to put it on the agenda for tonight, and then we'd also have to waive the 3 readings, or the additional readings. Mr. Boyle, go ahead.
Thank you, and Madam President, members of council, I certainly understand the process and the procedural aspects of this, and perhaps Law Director McCloof might be able to shed a little bit more of the sense of urgency, and if any, on it. But from the administration standpoint, I know that this has been a process that our lawyer, both the council and the executives, has been working on for quite some time. And again, if there are unanswered questions, I assume that those will be posed. But getting back to from the administrative standpoints, I feel very comfortable, again, on behalf of Executive Fitzgerald, that the work that Brian Zimmerman and his staff and crew, as well as, I think it's fair to give kudos to Judge Russo, who set up this board that worked so hard on this matter. And I feel very comfortable and confident that this is a fantastic opportunity for both of these entities. And I've had an opportunity to work with the Metro Parks very closely on some matters, and I'm very strongly of the opinion that moving faster now would be beneficial. But I do think that Mr. McCloof, and I apologize, I'm looking over there, if you could shed some light on the need to move on this, as our lawyer, I think that would.
Well, here's the problem, Mr. Boyle. You guys work on something for months and months, and then you waltz in here and tell us we got to do it tonight. And I think that's where the friction that I probably voiced, I know for myself and other people on council, that, things have worked on for long periods of time, and you tell us, rush and do it today. We have to bend our rules. And the public has this, understanding we have the 3 rules, they can come and debate about it and all that kind of stuff. And it's a wonderful project, but do we want to do it in one reading without having the opportunity to go through the process?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Gallagher.
Mr. Zimmerman, I think this is your opportunity to provide us some insight as to what we would gain by not waiting 2 weeks.
Well, thank you again. One of the things that you will see with Metro Parks is we have been moving everything forward as fast as we possibly can. Now, there are some in the community, some council members who think we're not moving fast enough from the city side. This does give us the opportunity. As we said, we have already started at least the first initial meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers. They do have a very long process that actually goes to get through. So, weeks become days, days become months. And so the sooner we're able to acquire the properties, in specific, the 2 lease options as we're moving forward, as the transactions set forward, it does allow us to be catalytic and to be able to move forward. We also have been already maintaining these parcels, some of the work that has already had to have been done on them. Certainly we can hold back, but there is a tremendous amount of work that's gone on from an economic development standpoint in the Flats area that's down in that end.
So there are Army Corps issues that would move forward immediately if this were passed this evening.
Well, that is the next phase that we actually have to get back to Buffalo and actually start working on the permitting process. We also have to work through the Coast Guard to develop a boat opportunity. So there are a lot of things that actually have to get into motion as absolutely soon as possible.
To my colleagues, anybody that has, and I know many of you have, dealt with the Corps of Engineering issues with that regard, that I would suggest we move forward with this.
Mr. Miller?
Madam Chair, the question that I have is that suppose we were to pass this out of committee today, amend the agenda, put it on second reading for tonight's meeting, but not on third reading. And to my mind, this would send a very clear signal that the council approves of this proposal, and unless some very serious problem comes up, that it's going to pass on June 10th. And my question is that if we sent that signal, is there anything that you would need to do and couldn't do as opposed to whether we did the whole thing tonight? I mean, like, for example, does moving forward with the Corps of Engineers absolutely depend on control of the property, or would this kind of signal allow you to move forward?
We would certainly need to have control of the property and able to move forward with any of the permitting. As most folks know, when the federal shutdown happened, that pushed a lot of other things back in the queue that we've already found out about, that they're working on other projects. So again, being very honest, that being able to move forward with the expediency that we would like to move at, there are so many moving components to try to hit a target date of less than a year, basically, at this point in time. 2 weeks can make all the difference in the world, and I do very much respect your process as the council members as well.
Mr. Sherrod?
So you're saying that all three of these components are touched by the Corps of Engineers?
Well, when you look at putting, docking into the east and west bank, both sides, those are two of the components that we will have to work with the Corps on, correct? Yeah,
To get the permits. Are all the drawings done on all those dockings, and everything has been submitted as a preliminary to the Corps of Engineers?
So the first phase, again, we did not want to assume that all the properties we're going to transfer. We're willing to take the next level of investment forward, but we also would have to have control of the property. So without being presumptuous, that process hasn't started other than the first meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers less than a month ago.
So back to Mr. Miller's question, the drawings are not done, and as far as anything you're going to be presenting, is that correct?
The drawings are not done, correct.
Okay, so that's going to take, maybe willing to bet, at least the 2 weeks.
That could be.
Yeah, let's be honest on that. But I mean, it seems to me that what we're doing is we're going to be moving on a simultaneous path down here, and it just seems like we're always changing the rules to make sure we expedite things, but it doesn't sound as though you're going to be prohibited from sitting down with an architectural design team to start doing drawings to put together the docks, have them ready to go in 2 weeks.
But like I said, I think as long as we see, that this transaction will be able to move forward, certainly we have energies that are being expended in other areas at this point in time as well.
Yeah, I find it hard to believe that you would not be starting to do those drawings, or would even come into this meeting already without at least a rendering of what they would look like. I assume you have those all done. Is that correct?
We have initial renderings, correct, but we're not going to go any farther until we actually see the transaction move forward.
That's your call. Thanks.
President, just a quick question. Do you expect any mitigation of wetlands or any areas that are going to be displaced because of this new access into the park?
Not at this time. I don't believe there's any mitigation, correct.
Okay. I'm okay if we expedite this, but I think Councilman Miller had a compromise, perhaps, that we would have a second reading and give the public a chance to weigh in if necessary, rather than wait till June 10th. Is there a way to do that?
You want to respond? I know Mr. Germana has a comment. Go ahead, Mr. Germana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, to my colleagues, I apologize. I got stuck at the post office with the bulk mailing. Sometimes it doesn't go as smooth as you want, so I apologize for not hearing the full presentation. But what I do want to say is that, working with the Metro Parks is collaboration at probably the highest quality collaboration. And certainly in my district, just this last year, Parma Heights had a connector trail. And the problem was I think it was a grant ODNR, and they only had so much time to do that. So, I mean, sometimes these time restraints, if it would have got caught up in the county council, the time might have run out for the time period. So, I feel comfortable with partnering with them. I don't think there's anybody else that really wants to partner in this. So, you know, the reason for the 3 readings is to hear from the public if there is some opposition. But it's a win-win situation for the residents of Cuyahoga County because Metro Parks, it has got a proven track record. So I'd like to accommodate the situation, Madam Chair.
Okay, all right, procedurally, Ms. Jean, how do we vote here? Now, we gotta vote, what, to vote it out of committee?
You need to vote it out of committee. Either
Okay.
you're going to vote it for second reading or second reading adoption under suspension of rules. And then it will be put on tonight's agenda, added to tonight's agenda under that.
Okay, so our
This-
options are, 1, to vote it out of committee under second reading adoption, right?
Well,
We don't vote
Right.
that, to walk it on until the other 5
right,
o'clock
but
meeting.
we would have to, the procedure is we'd vote second reading suspension.
Or
to be-
just vote it out of committee for second reading period.
Right, but second reading suspension would just mean to walk, then we'd have to vote again to
Right, to walk it on,
tonight.
right. Did everybody got that clear? Okay, so a vote for second reading would just be to put it on, and then would be voted on June 10th, or second reading adoption would be voted on tonight, and then we'd have to do the other procedural things tonight.
Madam Chair, if
Okay.
I could make the motion
Okay.
for second reading suspension, and then if it doesn't pass, then we know it'll be second reading, and you'll understand.
All right, so it's been moved by Mr. Jemian and seconded by Mr. Gallagher to have a second reading suspension, so that would be walked on tonight and voted on. Okay, is that clear? So a yes would be that we would vote it out and vote on it tonight. All right, you want to call the roll, please?
Okay, moving the item to the full council for second reading adoption under suspension of rules. Calling the roll, Ms. Conwell.
No.
Mr. Jones.
Yes, I'll support it.
Mr. Hairston.
Yes.
Ms. Simon.
Yes.
Mr. Greenspan. Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Brady is absent this evening. Mr. Germana.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. Schron.
No.
And Ms. Conley.
Yes. Okay,
Motion
so
carries.
motion carries, so it'll be voted out of committee, and we will then have another vote as to whether to walk it onto the agenda, so you can actually change your mind if you don't vote to put it on the agenda for tonight. Okay, all right. Anything else on this matter? I'd like to thank the folks from the Metro Park, and I'd like to second what Ms. Simon said about Acacia. I passed there frequently, and it really is looking very, very good. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. I paid dues for 25 years.
Well, you got, hey. How many blacks and minorities were in that club? Okay, we have the next item, collective, Jean, do you need to read this before we go into executive session? No.
Chair.
Okay. We have an executive session. Hold on, I got to read our little script here. Okay, all meetings of Cuyahoga County are open to the public under the Ohio Public Meetings Law. Under that law, council, folks, can you keep it down, please? Under that law, council may go into executive session during a meeting for specifically authorized purposes. During executive session, council confers outside the hearing of the public. Council may not make any decisions about any matters in executive session. All decisions are made in public. This afternoon, council will go into executive session to discuss collective bargaining with International Union of Operating Engineers, AFL-CIO, Local 18S technicians, representing approximately 4 employees. And I believe, Mr. Majid, that there is a second item for the executive session? No? No, or yes or no? I thought there was a second item
No, it's not been advertised.
for the executive session. Okay, all right. All right, during this session, live stream will be down, and we will ask all those not specifically needed for executive session to leave council chamber. Anyone may re-enter. Is there a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining?
I so move.
Moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Mr. Greenspan. That's what I thought. Okay, and we'd like to add also there'll be discussions about pending litigation. All right, call the roll. Okay, all right.
No, it's just moving to executive session for collective bargaining matters. Okay, calling the roll to move into executive session, Ms. Conwell? Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hairston? Ms. Simon? Mr. Greenspan? Mr. Miller? Mr. Germana? Mr. Gallagher? Mr. Gallagher stepped out for the moment. Mr. Schron?
Yes.
And Ms. Conley?
Yes, I don't know.
Motion carries.
I guess you could have no not to go into executive session. All right, who's here for executive session? All right, does anybody have a problem with our extern,